Hey, sports fans, PB&Z Sports Chaos. And we got some instant analysis of what was one of the most wildest NFL weekends ever. We had 3 walk-off touchdown games, 1 field goal at the buzzer, basically, a 33-point comeback, and an epic Brady colossal meltdown. We're going to address all those. But first of all, I guess we got to announce this one thing. Oh, of course, we had that little game out in Las Vegas we'll talk about as well. But the World Cup is over. Argentina won. Were you content with the way that played out, PB?
Hey, all I know is whether you're a fan of soccer, if you just sat down and watched that game from beginning to end, it was crazy. Especially obviously once the 75th to 80th minute rolled around and France scored 2 goals in the matter, both by Mbappe in a matter of about 2 or 3 minutes to tie it, and then to score in overtime. You think, oh my God, we're going to win now for sure. And then France comes right back and scores again in overtime because it's not a golden goal situation or sudden death situation in soccer, right? So they had to play it out. France tied it 3-3 and had a chance to win it actually on an unbelievable kick and save by the Argentinian goalie. And then the shootout, I just hate when things come down to shootouts. I don't like that. But good for them. They haven't won in a long time. Messi gets his World Cup. Good for the fans.
Well, the thing I have with the shootouts is the box score shows a 3-3 game. So unless you read into it a little more, you have 3-3. Argentina won. You know what I'm saying? That's where the box score reads, right?
Right, and then it says pens next to it because they won on penalty kicks. Yeah.
Hey, by the way, for these fans on Twitter who keep putting out there that Messi is the greatest athlete of the world, he only plays with his feet. He has no hand-eye coordination involved in the game, all right? He doesn't run a 40 and 4.2. He doesn't run 100 and 9.5. He doesn't long jump 29 feet. He doesn't high jump 10 feet. He can't dunk a ball. He doesn't throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. He can't bench press 225 29 times. He's not the best or greatest athlete in the world. He's just the greatest soccer player. There's a distinction there. Athletes do athletic stuff. They just don't kick a ball around the field. Come on, fans. Don't lose your minds.
Like it.
All right, that's my thought. All right, let's talk about the first thing that happened in the NFL. Minnesota's comeback against the Colts. Was it a colossal failure by the Colts or just an epic comeback by Minnesota? By the way, that's the greatest comeback ever, 33 points down, right? It beat the Bills' comeback against the Titans in that rally game by Frank Reich when he was backing up Jim Kelly, right?
Right. And that was a playoff game, I believe. And
it was, correct.
And then the greatest comeback so it was by far for regular season. That was a playoff game. And then, of course, you had the Super Bowl, which was an epic comeback, the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history. But what's funny about it is Matt Ryan was on the losing end of both of the greatest Super Bowl comeback ever and the greatest regular season comeback ever. It doesn't say much from Matty Ice, that's for sure, to be able to, start off with that many points and then lay an egg in the second half. But I mean, it was just one of those things where it was just like, you felt it the whole time. You just felt the momentum building, and you're like, there's still a chance they can still do this. If they get this, they can get this, and then they can get the 2 points. And then it was such a great game to watch on TV. I mean, it was a classic. It was a classic for sure.
So I don't want to blame Matty Ice. Much like in the Super Bowl, Kyle Shanahan didn't coach well in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. And Jeff Saturday and the team let him down in this game, without a doubt. They didn't give him any exciting play calls, nothing like that. So I don't want to pick on poor Matty Ice. It's not his fault. They didn't put the ball, didn't run the same offense.
Hey, if you only could put up 3 points in a second half of a game against the Minnesota, which has the worst pass defense in the NFL, I would say there's a little bit of blame on the quarterback there.
A little bit, but it's the play caller too. Yeah. You don't give him the plays. You can only run the plays you give him. So, hey, by the way, the Bills kicked out your Finns with a field goal at the end of the game. Finns actually played very well in the snow and freezing cold and all that other stuff, right?
Yeah, that was one of my takeaways too, is that the Finns gave the Bills a game. I mean, I was glad to see that they actually came out of those 2 losses and really competed hard against a great Buffalo team in the elements up in Buffalo. I think it lines them up nicely to play, this coming week against Green Bay. But
by the way, one correction. Last week I said they were playing the Pats on Christmas Eve. They played the Pats on New Year's Eve.
Oh, okay.
Last week I was saying that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, a good observation I heard today. Green Bay having to play down there after playing in last night's game that they beat the Rams in, and that unbelievable weather up there, which was, I think, was in the teens. Game down in Miami next week is going to be a Christmas present of Green Bay.
Yeah, well, yeah, but ironically enough, and I'm leaving out of the country, so I'm not going to be around this weekend. But ironically enough, the low on Sunday morning in Miami is going to be 49 degrees. Now, granted, by the time kickoff comes, it'll be, in the high 60s, but a little chilly weekend for the people down in Miami.
Ooh, okay. All right. We're going to pick that game in a few minutes. All right. The other thing I got to talk about before with the big story. Brady, 4 turnovers in the third quarter in a game they were winning 17-0, and it was 17-3 at the half. Completely, I mean, right now, he is absolutely killing his legacy, in my opinion. Killing his legacy. By the way, 4 turnovers, all on him. I know one ball was deflected and caused an interception, right? But the other interception was clearly on him, throwing it to no one but the other team. The 2 fumbles, especially the one on the handoff to Lenny Fournette, it's a basic dive. He ends up having to toss them. Listen, fans. As a quarterback in Pop Warner Pee Wee football, the first play you learn is the dive handoff. Tom Brady could not execute a dive handoff. He had to throw the ball at the runner's belly. That is an embarrassment for a guy that's been playing for 22 years. I'm sorry. And I can't give him any more slack. If he knew he was having issues at home, he should have stayed retired.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough road. I mean, the only saving grace he has is he's like 3rd or 4th.
I picked them to go to Super Bowl.
Yeah. The only saving grace is he's like 3rd or 4th in the NFL in passing yards. So he's still putting the ball up in the air, and guys are still catching it, and he's still putting up a ton of yards. So that's the only saving grace he has in his final career. He can say, hey, I was 45 years old and threw for, 5,000 yards, and I was 3rd in the NFL in passing at 45. So, I mean, that's the only saving grace he has for right now for this year. Obviously, they still have a shot at the playoffs.
Jeff George did that in his career. And where did that take him? No one considers Jeff George an elite quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. But if they can stay in first place, make the playoffs, and win a playoff game at home, we'll see who it looks like they might be playing Dallas in that game, which would be a stretch. But if they can win that home game and get to the second round of the playoffs, maybe that's a win too. I don't know. We'll see.
By the way, speaking of Dallas, good segue. Dak Prescott, man, same thing as Tom. You're killing the Cowboys. Your 10th interception since you came back from the injury, with 2 the other day, including that walk-off pick 6 in overtime to the Jacksonville Jags. By the way, PB, Jacksonville, believe it or not, is not out of the playoff equation right now. Tennessee slips up. Jacksonville runs the table. They're going to make the playoffs.
I know, and that was another great game. Lots and lots of action in that game. And I'll tell you what, a couple weeks ago, I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago, when Jacksonville had a big win, I said, you know what? Jacksonville's it was one of my storylines that Jacksonville is impressive. Next year, I'm leaning towards them winning that division and definitely picking them to make the playoffs. Well, guess what? That might happen this year. The way things are going, they already smoked Tennessee in Tennessee. They beat them by at least 2 touchdowns, right? They got to play the Jets Thursday night, and we're going to be picking that game in a minute. If they can get past the Jets, then they got Houston, granted on the road, and Houston beat them earlier in the year, so that might not be as an easy task as you think, but they got to beat Houston on the road, and then they'll have that final game back in Jacksonville against Tennessee, which could be for the division.
Yes.
Wow. That's pretty exciting. And the Lions in the NFC could be in a very similar situation, creeping up on teams in that same. They'll be playing Green Bay, I think, their final game, but they could be in the same situation.
By the way, Tennessee doesn't have an easy schedule. They got Dallas before that a game against Jacksonville, and I believe it's in Dallas.
Yeah, I think Jacksonville right now, to me, is the odds-on favorite to win that division.
Yeah. All right. Before we make some picks, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. The colossal nightmare at the end of the Pats game against the Vegas Raiders. First of all, I do not blame Ramondre. He pitched to a guy that was sitting there on the sideline. He wasn't expecting that guy to throw the ball 25 yards backwards. He figured that, Jacoby could keep running the ball, which he probably could have. Maybe wasn't going to go much further.
Not to mention
the fact Ramondre's fault.
Right, and not to mention the fact that he ran backwards 10 or 15 yards before he threw it 20 yards back.
Yes,
you got to keep going this way. The end zone was that way.
So I leave Stevens out of the equation. Jacoby, just a huge brain fart, just huge brain fart.
Dumbest play. I mean, the only thing that can happen, and you could see there was 3 defenders that in front of Mac Jones. Mac Jones would have had to catch that ball. There was nobody behind him, so there's no more laterals. So the only thing that could have happened is Mac Jones would have had to run 70 yards, 65 yards for a touchdown. That's pretty much the only thing that could have happened on that play. I mean, it was the dumbest play I think I've ever seen a professional football player make.
I will say it was the dumbest play by a player, but the other game, I've been thinking about this, PB. You and I were there live 4 years ago. The Miami Miracle, which was the dumbest coaching move ever, putting Rob Gronkowski back there as the deep safety.
Yeah.
When he can't move, he was injured as it was. How's he going to get a guy that runs pretty fluidly? So, I almost think that's a worse game because in that one, the Pats were winning in that game.
Right. Right. Exactly. So they're a different circumstance, a different situation, which again makes
this one was going to go to overtime where who knows? The Raiders had some momentum going. You never know, right?
Right. Raiders could have still won the game if he did just take his knee, and then it would have been a moot point. And hey, Raiders still won the game. We don't know though. I mean, the right thing to do there is if you pitch it to Jacoby, hey, Jacoby could have maybe deked a few people and maybe went down the sidelines, maybe tried to go that way. But what he did in that instant was, and I know some people have said, well, that's Ramondre's fault because Ramondre set the tone that, hey, let's razzle dazzle the situation. Because Ramondre also could have just said, we're not going to look at the defenders up in front of us. We're not going to get this down there. I'm just going to take a knee too. So he had an opportunity. He didn't make the stupid play, but he still had a little bit of a mental breakdown there.
Yeah. Well, you know what? In my opinion, they didn't deserve the win anyways. Mac was 11 out of 30 for 112 after starting the game. I think 6 for 8. That was a day. I know Romani had a great game, ran for 179, right? I think 20 of them on that play. You know what? They didn't deserve the win, in my opinion.
Yeah, and they're done.
So they're 7-7.
They're done.
They're in trouble. I mean,
they're gonna play Cincinnati, Buffalo, and Miami. They're not gonna. I mean, if they win one of those games, it'll be a miracle.
And I thought they would win the Miami game easily in the cold, but after what Miami did in Buffalo, it's not going to be as bad weather in New England on New Year's Eve. I've looked at long-range forecasts compared to what it was last week in Buffalo. So I don't know that we're going to beat Miami.
Right. It's very possible they lose their last 4 games of the year and they finish 7-10.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. All right, man, let's make some picks. All these got some playoff implications. I can't believe we're talking about the Jets still being in the playoffs. They did lose to Detroit, but they still have an outside shot. But they're playing the Jags, who, like we just talked about, they win out. They're in the playoffs, right?
Yeah. And there may even be a scenario where they don't even have to win out. They could win 2 out of 3 and still get in the playoffs based on Tennessee's schedule. But, I think this is the 2 teams in opposite directions theory, right? I mean, Jacksonville's trending in the right direction, big win over Dallas. And then you got Jets trending in the other direction. It doesn't look like Mike White's going to be ready to play, which means another game for Zach Wilson. I know he had a decent game last Sunday, but I don't think he's going to continue that. So for me, this is the Jags game to win, even though it's on the road, even though it's on short rest. I like what I'm seeing out of Trevor and the rest of that offense. So
yeah, that's the big thing. It's on the road, it's short rest, which usually is a recipe for disaster. And Jacksonville's coming north to cold weather. I am going to take the Jags, but to your point, you said it last week about the Jets defense in Detroit. They can play D, and if they do, Jags might be in trouble, but I'm going to still roll with the Jags. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be up there in the upper echelon next year when we talk about Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin, Joe Burrow. You got to include Trevor, I think, as of next year.
I think I agree with that.
All right. G Money also likes the Jags, I think, right?
Yes.
All right. Eagles, Cowboys. We've had a couple of people flip-flopping on this, or I should say one person, Mr. G Money, because now we hear the mustache got him issues, going to play most likely. It's still early, but suppose he's going to play. To me, by the way, it's a must-win for the Cowboys. They needed to hold on to their position in the playoffs.
Yeah,
they're
right.
In the playoffs. They're in the playoffs. They're already clinched, but they've got to, they want to keep that seed where they play Tampa Bay.
Right. And if they win this too, they're only a game behind Philadelphia again, because now you split with Philly. So depending on tiebreakers, if Philly somehow drops another one and Dallas runs the table, there's a chance they could even still get that number 1 seed. So this is a big game for Dallas. As much as I respect Gardner Minshew as a backup, I don't think he's going to be able to get it done on the road in Dallas. Big game. I'm taking the Cowboys here.
G Money's going. He's rolling with Philly though, right? He's going to keep with that.
He
and by the way, if Gardner Minshew wins this game against the Cowboys, I actually believe it hurts Jalen Hurts MVP. You heard last week Micah Parsons' big storm about he's a system quarterback. He's playing the system. If Gardner wins playing the system, Micah Parsons was right about Jalen and probably not being an MVP because he's a system quarterback.
Right. Yep. It's a good point. Good point.
I'm going to roll my Cowboys, though. I have to roll my Cowboys.
Okay.
All right. The Bengals, Pats. I mean, we just talked about it after we saw last week. Unless the Bengals totally look past them, because they do have a big game with Baltimore in 2 weeks after that, right? Yep. Unless they totally look past the Pats. I know it's on Christmas Eve, so you never know what can happen. People have things going on in their heads, Christmas Eve, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's possible. I'm going Cincinnati. What do you think?
Yeah, I am too. I think it would have been funny if Belichick, when they commented on that stupid play at the end, and his comment was, "We're on to Cincinnati." That would have been classic.
that would have been. G Money, of course, is running with the Bengals, right?
Yeah. All
right. Here's a game that just got interesting simply by the fact that they beat Washington on Sunday night. Giants play the Vikings. The Vikings, who look pathetic for one half against the Colts. I got a question. Is it possible after the epic comeback they have a little bit of a hangover?
It could be a hangover. It could also be momentum. I mean, there's no question this team offensively has what it takes to win games, right? It's their defense that's going to kill them in the playoffs. And then anything can happen in any game with Minnesota in it. That's the way I look at it. Do I think the Giants have a stout defense that can slow down Minnesota? No. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to be able to slow down the Giants, even though they don't really have a strong passing game, right? We know right. Danny Dimes can run the ball for sure. And then you have, of course, Saquon. So if they key in on those two players, that should give them an advantage to be able to try and win that game. So, and it's in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the Vikings. And I think Washington, I think the Giants had their big moment beating Washington after tying them at home. They go on the road and they beat them. They had their big moment there. So I think there's a little bit of a letdown going into Minnesota. I'm taking the Vikings.
By the way, Kayvon Thibodeau finally came out and broke out of, his what people have been expected of him when he was almost projected as the #1 draft pick last year. He exploded in that game. If he plays like that against Kirk Cousins, man, similar to what Dallas did to Kirk Cousins and Micah Parsons and the crew, could be a tough day. I am going to go Vikings. This game was in New York. I'll tell you right now, I picked New York.
Okay. All right. So we all got the Vikings on that one. Okay.
Yeah. All right. The other one coming up. It's been 50 years since the Immaculate Reception. The anniversary is actually Friday night. These guys play on Saturday night, Christmas Eve. The Raiders play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Believe it or not, PB, there are playoff implications in this game as well.
Yeah, these are two teams fighting. Pittsburgh's been, they've been hanging in there. And, I usually don't pick against, I pick Pittsburgh, and I usually don't pick Vegas either. So this puts me in a little conundrum here. So I'm going to go with the home team. I'm going to go with the better coach. I'm going to go with the Steelers.
I believe the Raiders are finally waking up. I'm taking the Raiders in this game. I think they're a better team going into this game. You are right. The coaching is better on the behalf of the Steelers. But I think the momentum of that epic win last week keeps the Raiders rolling, and they win this game. What's G Money got? He's got Steelers.
He also has Pittsburgh, and Vegas did the same thing last year. They won a lot of games down the stretch to make it into the playoffs on the last week. So
the winner of this game, if they run the table, they're probably in at 9-8.
Yeah, it depends what Miami and the Chargers do, but yeah.
All right. Packers, Dolphins. Now, on the surface, you say this is a slam dunk Dolphins. Something's happening in Green Bay the last few weeks. They're on a little bit of a win streak. Rodgers no longer is trying to be Superman. He's playing within the system, which he should have been doing all along. Those two stud running backs are really showing them something. They both had 3 touchdowns combined last night when they beat the Rams. I'm leaning to the Dolphins, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay hangs in there and gives them a game for sure. This one's on Christmas Day, so you have a big slate on Saturday this week, and then there's just a couple games on Sunday, this being one of them. And I think Green Bay will be able to run the ball pretty effectively, and if they can do that and not worry about the pass, make quick passes to Dobbs, make quick passes to Watson and whatever, Cobb when you have to. I think they can control the clock. I think they can move the ball on Miami. And if they can do that on many drives, whether they score on the end of them or not, if they can continue to do that drive after drive after drive, that's the recipe to beat the Dolphins. Now, will they do that is another question. And how quickly can Miami just strike on the Green Bay defense when they have the ball? I think in Miami, like you said, moving into the warmer weather for Green Bay, slight edge to Miami there, better offensive weapons, of course, at receiver for sure. I'm going to take the Dolphins, but I think it will be a close game.
By the way, Green Bay is not out of this thing. Here's the path of Green Bay. They need 2 or 3 things to happen. 1, Seattle loses 1 game and Green Bay runs the table. 2, Washington loses 2 games. Green Bay has to run the table. 3, the G-men lose out. 2 of those 3 scenarios and Green Bay wins out, they're in the playoffs, which we would not have thought that 3 weeks ago.
Right. And I think Seattle losing one of their last 3 is the most likely of those situations.
So you need one of the other 2 to happen.
But Green Bay's got to win this game in Miami. Then they have to win next week. They're playing I can't think of who they're playing next week, but they have a game that's next week that's not simple and easy.
I actually think they have Detroit and Minnesota left.
Well, they have Detroit the final week. Maybe they do have Minnesota. Yeah, they do have. You're right. You're right. They got to beat Miami this week in Miami. Then they got to beat the Vikings. And then they have to beat Detroit in Green Bay.
There you go.
Which is very possible.
Yeah.
But Detroit's that game could be the winner of that game makes the playoffs and the losers out. That Green Bay Detroit game.
Yep. You know what? You've convinced me. I'm going Packers.
Oh, I convinced you the other way. Okay.
I'm going Packers. You say there's a chance.
All right.
There you go. All right, man.
Early edition of PB and Z this week, because PB is going to be out of the country, and next week we're going to have a late edition. So we won't be doing our show probably until New Year's Eve, Saturday night at the earliest. So we might be missing some of those Saturday games for you, but we'll definitely get the Sunday games.
Nice. All right, brother. Talk to you soon. Take care. Have a good trip.
Thanks, man.